And we're live. It is Thursday. It is the 17th day of July, the year of our Lord, 2025. It is 8 o'clock a.m. That rustling sound you hear in the background is Cleo the puppy having a great deal of fun with a paper bag. And if she is having fun with a paper bag, she is not attacking any of the wires that connect my camera to the computer or my headphones to the computer, and therefore we tolerate a lot in the way of rustling with a paper bag. I have a story to tell you this morning. I think it took place back in the late 1970s. It's been a long time since I've looked at the article in question. It took place at the New Republic magazine when a young editor named Michael Kinsley was running the place under the always watchful eye of the owner, Marty Peretz. And of course, it was about Marty that Kinsley later coined his famous aphorism, "Rich men don't run magazines or own magazines to represent other people's ideas." So bear that in mind as you hear this story. A young freelance writer approached Michael Kinsley with an article about Senator Ted Kennedy, who was then contemplating a presidential run against Jimmy Carter. And the article was going to be about Ted Kennedy's extramarital proclivities, let's just say, which were apparently numerous and legion, and she wrote the article. It was well reported, and then Marty Peretz killed the article. And Michael Kinsley did what any good editor would do under that situation. He resigned. And Marty Peretz spent the better part of a week trying to get him to come back, which he did. But he came back under the following circumstances, which was that he was permitted to write an article explaining the dispute, but with the caveat that he could not say what the article in question was about, because that would, of course, violate the terms that Marty had originally set for not publishing the article at all, which is that he didn't want to talk about Ted Kennedy's extramarital dalliances. And so so Kinsley had this problem, which was how to write an article about something that he genuinely wanted to explain, which was why he believed this was an important article, but without saying what the underlying article was about. And so he hit on a brilliant strategy, which was whenever the subject of the article came up, he would just replace the subject with the word, I think it was in all caps, banana. And so, you'd have sentences like, well, the article, first of all, had one of the great leads of all time, which was, "A few readers other than my parents may have noticed the marked decline of the quality of this magazine over the last week." And then, but he, therefore, whenever, I tried to publish an article about Ted Kennedy's banana, and sentences like that running throughout. And over the course of the article, he was done cleverly enough that you could figure out entirely what Kinsley's argument was with respect to the thing. And so I mentioned this because we find ourselves in a similar situation today. Yesterday, a rumor went around, it was a little more than a rumor, that the Wall Street Journal had a story about banana. And that they were going to run it, and that it was going to be devastating. And the White House hit the ceiling, and the president has been, bleating about this all day with increasing sense of anxiety. He clearly believes banana. But the story has not run. And the question is, and it's totally irresponsible to say what banana is. And so all we can do is, keep hitting refresh on the Wall Street Journal website. And I can't tell you how many people in Washington spent yesterday hitting refresh on the Wall Street Journal website, trying to and hoping that this would come to be. And as late as last night, I was trading text messages with people about, banana, trying to figure out, had the White House managed to spike the story? Had the was it vapor always to begin with? Answer: I don't think so. Did the president's increasingly deranged bleats tend to validate that at least he believed that the Wall Street Journal had the banana story? And, you know, I thought to myself, how are we going to talk about this today? Because it really would be completely irresponsible for me to just say what the story is. And then it came to me that Michael Kinsley had faced this problem once before, and he'd used it, he'd solved it with banana. And that is the way we're going to handle it today. Um, the sun is shining, the birds are chirping. It's going to be a great freaking day, whether banana happens or not. And
you're watching Dog Shirt TV, a fucking revolution in morning television.
You are watching Dog Shirt TV, and it is a fucking revolution in morning television. And one of the revolutionary features is that I can, on command, resurrect a banana concept for how to talk about something without talking about it from the late 1970s. And another one of the revolutionary features is that, I can, we can see if we can maintain this conceit for the entire show, or whether somebody will let slip. And a third revolutionary features, which, as I say, there are many, is that John Hawkinson can interrupt the morning monologue, because that is his prerogative. We are not allowed to have fun anymore. But Alicia, Mike, John Hawkinson, great to see you all.
Good morning, Ben. I just wanted to address what I call the Emperor's New Cactus theory. And I don't know if you're aware, because I'm not sure if the email I sent you while I was in DC was too subtle, but we all know that Riverside does some post-processing of the audio. And it turns out that if you go and watch a recording of you and Holly talking about the cactus, or yesterday's recording on YouTube, the cactus is entirely silent. This is, of course, hilarious because you are all commenting on the rude language, perhaps the language Jonathan Rauch might object to, emanating from the cactus's sorry excuse for a mouth. and it is as if the cactus has been bleeped into silence. And I
Wow.
just wanted to draw your attention to this critical issue of a dog shirt TV regular, if that is what the cactus could be construed as.
Well, it's certainly an irregular regular. So the cactus has been silenced by Riverside post processing,
Well, that's my theory. I mean, maybe EJ is, editing it out explicitly.
editing out the cactus.
I mean, I wouldn't know.
But there's some human or AI cactus erasure going on here.
I
But
don't
wait, I think that might be a bridge too far. I mean,
agree.
the cactus has been resurrected. It's going to move in mysterious ways. And hopefully people will be debating the meaning of the cactus's silence millennia from now.
Well, I think that's exactly the right answer. That the cactus, it is not for us to question the ways of the cactus,
Yeah.
um, and I'm sorry, John, that you can't hear the cactus.
Oh, well, I mean, I can hear it
Um,
today. I just want to be clear. It's hilarious, not so much because of the cactus, be it AI or alien or some other intelligence, but rather that it gives the appearance that Ben and Holly and the other contributors to the show are playing a game pretending that the cactus is speaking when the cactus is not actually speaking.
Well, so I mean, all I can say to this is that the cactus, if the cactus, the ability to hear the cactus, turns out to be a benefit for paid subscribers who actually show up on Riverside, and that some of you want to consider that a sign of enlightenment, that you can hear the cactus, whereas the mere YouTube and Substack non-paid subscribers, you can only hear the cactus if you are in the studio live, and that this is a sign of being one of the elect. I would not discourage that theory.
Are we at the point where the cactus following has an elect? Usually that's a post-Reformation development in the theology, and I think
Oh,
we might be getting a little too over our skis on this.
okay. I'm not going to debate the terminology. Look, I am the
What else do you do?
Prepare for tomorrow, the second coming. The anti-cactus will be on the show.
Yeah, there may be a second cactus coming tomorrow. And look, I cannot I cannot explain the ways of the cactus to you. All I can say is consider, if you cannot hear the cactus, whether you may just not be worthy of hearing the cactus. And that maybe, no, John, John hears the cactus when he's here, but consider, if you're one of those people who cannot hear the cactus and who thinks that the cactus may be silent, consider instead the possibility that the cactus may not be speaking to you. And that suggests that there is work you need to do. The first bit of work is to become a paid subscriber of Dogshirt Daily, Dogshirt TV, and that makes you eligible to hear the cactus, but it's not enough.
So a subscription is an indulgence.
No, a subscription is not an indulgence. A subscription is the it won't forgive your sins. It won't prevent you from going to hell. The subscription entitles you, it's like a dinner invitation, entitles you to be in the presence of Cactus Actual. And to be in the presence of Cactus Actual, you have to be here. A recording can never capture quite the fidelity of the presence of a musician or God or a cactus. And so you can try to listen to a recording of the cactus, but if you're not here, you might not hear it. So become a paid subscriber and show up to the Greek chorus and then you too will be able to hear the cactus. Alicia, what a pleasure to see you. I had no idea you were joining today.
Well, I was asking if you were going to be alone, but Mike saved you because he miraculously created an office in 20 minutes. That's how I understood it.
I created the backdrop years ago. What you can't see is that this computer is still sitting on a teetering pile of books, and everything is haphazard except for the wall behind me.
Well,
It's impressive.
Thank you.
So, Mike, how much of your day yesterday was spent hearing about banana?
A decent amount. I think you and I heard it probably from the same person, because
I heard it from multiple people.
Okay, I initially heard it from somebody who sent me a text that was the exact same as yours. And then talking to a few of my other friends in that world, it was very clear that it was making the rounds and had some legs to it.
And the evidence of the legs are that
not circular reporting.
Yeah, I mean, nobody has contradicted it. Nobody's said it's not, it's just vapor. And the White House seems to be going completely ape about banana.
And doing things that are not banana, but are going to generate a lot of attention, almost as if they were trying to distract from something. Like, why is Jerome Powell on the chopping block now? Why was Maureen Comey fired yesterday? Like, there's a lot of
Maureen Comey, who did work on banana,
yes.
right?
Yeah, but like, look, it's a good strategy. Traditionally, historically, firing a Comey from a Justice Department position has always lessened the controversy of anything at hand and has no second order consequences.
Right. No, I think this is one of the reasons why Trump keeps lists of Comeys.
Yes.
So that you can, when shit gets bad, there's one available to fire.
Exactly.
So should we expect that banana will materialize today, or is it banana delayed here or banana denied?
I don't think it can be fully denied because, very similar to your Kinsley anecdote, if they don't run with banana, there are enough journalists in the DC, New York reporting ecosystem that will jump at the chance to do a story on why the story was not run.
Yes, I think banana will have to happen because you can, if you're the editors of the Wall Street Journal, you can spike banana, but you cannot spike the stories about how you spiked banana.
Exactly.
And I think the Wall Street Journal reporters will ride or die with their editors as long as they think their editors are fighting for them and working with them. But the moment they think their editors are killing their story, that is when stuff leaks.
Exactly.
So, Alicia, is this completely incomprehensible to a Canadian, or is the subject here coming into focus?
It was with your clarification offline of what we're talking about. I missed the opening and my internet was pretty poopy. All I can say is very immaturely, you're going to have to do something with Gwen Stefani's song Hollaback Girl.
I don't get the reference. You're going to have to explain that one to me, and you may even have to sing.
No. There's a line in it, and it says, "This shit is bananas. Bananas."
No doubt, Ben, if you're not familiar, Alicia, I hope I'm not going to insult you with this description. A very mediocre ska revival band from the mid-90s.
Whatever.
All right.
Your country produced them. No, I mean, it's incomprehensible in the sense that this. Sorry. It's incomprehensible that this is even happening. Look, I don't understand how you got to this point. I asked ChatGPT this the other day.
Well, we don't either. What did ChatGPT have to say about how we got to this point?
I think I sent you the screenshot. My question was really vague for it, which was, how did we get here? And then I refused to clarify.
Yeah, I think, I said on Blue Sky the other day that a great deal more work had been done on artificial intelligence than on artificial wisdom. And a lot of people thought I was joking, but I wasn't joking at all. Like, why does nobody spend time trying to make a chatbot that has good judgment? And it may not know very much, it may not be able to do very much, but it, will help you. It'll explain things like how we got here. That's not an intelligence problem so much as it is like a wisdom problem.
But in order for that to work, you would have to trust the wisdom of the people building the bot. And look at the people currently building the bots. Like, are Elon Musk, Sam Altman, Mark Zuckerberg really people whose sagacity you want to rely upon?
Well, so first of all, I don't know that, I wouldn't trust the Maytag company executives to wash my clothes or to do my dishes. But that doesn't mean I wouldn't necessarily, like, I understand how the dishwasher works, and I have confidence in the algorithm. And if some group of very, very smart, very rich engineers set to work trying to create artificial wisdom, I would stress test the model, but I don't I don't doubt that we could, automate better decision making, better judgment, just as we automate better eyesight. So I'm not. I just think nobody cares about the quality of judgment in Silicon Valley, and so they don't work on the problem. But I don't deeply mistrust their ability to address that problem any more than I trust their ability. Look, I don't trust their sense of fun, but I don't think we should all therefore avoid video games, though I personally do.
Yeah, we should.
Carol, great to see you. What's on your mind this morning? Did you spend yesterday thinking about banana?
No, I've spent very, very little time on banana.
Excellent. And that would be an example of non-technologically assisted natural wisdom. What's on your mind this morning?
If you want to continue with what you're talking about, I'm happy with that, but people in the chat have been telling me they'd like me to come back.
And you're back.
And talk about Japan.
Oh, you want to talk? So
that's what they're asking for. I don't mind.
No, I think a return to Tokugawa Japan or other periods of Japanese history may be just what the doctor ordered.
Personally, I would rather talk about it than about banana.
Well, then we shall. It's a very large subject, of course. Do you have specific areas in it you want to address?
Well, I had a few ideas, yes.
All right.
One or two just briefly. Well, I mean, not that any of these end up being briefly, because I can go on for hours about any of them. But getting back to the idea about totalitarian state, thinking about it again, because it's always easy to rethink things when you've been talking to somebody smart about it. If you look at their control over the daimyo, the rulers of the various sections of Japan that were not under the Tokugawa direct control, they were very strongly controlled, very tightly. But the population in general was not. So when I think about Tokugawa Japan, I think about a very vibrant popular culture and a lot of things going on. But there's also the other side of the daimyo who have to go back to their domain half the time, but they have to leave their wives and children as hostages in Tokyo, and various things like that. So, they were under very tight control, but you get below that, and it's really much more loose. And about the Enlightenment philosophers, I was thinking about that, and I really think because they all really dealt with God. Wasn't specifically a Christian God, but the God's inalienable rights. And that, for the Tokugawa, I think would still fit into the whole Christianity thing that they wanted to get rid of.
And so how do you understand, I could make an argument that this form of authoritarianism or totalitarianism is sort of the best you can do in that period because, realistically, you don't have good surveillance mechanisms. Everyone's not carrying around cell phones, so you can't follow everybody all the time. You can have a bunch of samurai going around and enforcing things, but it's very one-to-one level enforcement. There aren't great mechanisms or technologies for mass control. And so we should really understand it as a 17th, 18th, 19th century proto-totalitarianism that sort of as much as it can do, given rural society.
I still would argue that all they're really interested in is the daimyo.
So that it's really not even aspiring to be more than that.
I mean, for example, they established, and it's just a small example, right? They established Yoshiwara as a free zone, right? They created a specific space for certain kinds of work. And samurai weren't really supposed to go there, but they did. And it would not have been that hard to go and drag them out because it's not that easy to disguise, right? You just make them take off their hat. They had very distinctive hairstyles, for example. And they didn't. It was more a matter of, does it look like it? As long as they're hiding their hair under a hat and people don't see that that's what they're doing, that's okay. So it's a different kind of control. Even with the samurai, but the daimyo, it's really important to maintain their, to control what they do.
So Alicia, I'm curious for your thoughts on this. Can we identify a proto-totalitarian? Sometimes when people describe Tokugawa Japan as sort of the world's first totalitarian society. And Carol argues that this is really missing a lot about Tokugawa Japan. I'm curious whether we can think of other models for what real, the sort of first totalitarian state.
See, I would suggest, for example, that early modern France, Louis XIV and XV, were in many ways much more controlling. Louis XV has that famous little speech about the state is me. You have, the parliament.
That's Louis XIV.
Power. No, that's the 15th.
It's the 15th? I thought that
I
was a Sun King thing.
know it's his
Um,
son or grandson.
okay.
Because, and I'll tell you why I'm so sure about that. Because I gave a job talk at the Naval Academy many years ago, and I wanted to build off of a question my husband had asked me, which essentially compared Japan and Louis XIV. But I couldn't find as clear a statement as the state is me, you derive their powers from me, without going to the 15th. And so I reimagined it as between the Shogun and Louis the 15th.
Interesting. So
That's the only
you know,
reason I would be that definite. Otherwise, I very defer greatly on Western history.
I think the thing about pre-revolutionary France is that there was a kind of flowering of ideas, some of which were, pretty radical, right? Rousseau, kind of Swiss, but he was operating in France. Um, Voltaire, right?
And they
These are
were
not.
within the Japanese context as well. They just weren't imported from the West.
All right, so then Alicia, Mike, help me out. If we throw out Tokugawa Japan and say not really even, do we have to get to Soviet Russia before we have anything that is really aspiring to totalitarianism, or can we say, you know the Jacobin France? What can we go with here as a sort of model of totalitarianism?
Are we defining totalitarianism by the ruler's intentions or by the ruler's capabilities? Because
Well,
that really changes how we answer the question.
right, because certainly the czars aspired to a lot of totalitarianism,
Yeah.
but no, I think you want some really active display of at least the desire for control of everything. Um, and um, you want police state aspirations and
Mhm.
capacity. You want, um, uh, very, very strict control over ideations and kind of an official ideology. And you know, you want nobody's allowed to step out of line. Maybe it's a 20th century thing, and
It
that there's really not a good example of it before the Soviets.
Well, if we want to go with simplistic internet answers, the Britannica, Encyclopedia Britannica has a post. It does not include any reference to Japan historically, and I would always defer to Carol on this. Anyway, she knows far more about that. But I mean, the whole definition of totalitarianism is something that emerges in the 20th century, and then what we have is like kind of a backfill trying to look for other examples and put it on it. But ones that they bring up are like Mauryan dynasty of India, Zulu chief Shaka, and I think there's a combination of it having to center around a specific individual coming in and replacing the rules and laws and centralizing power around them rather than monarchs being despots. I mean, there's just endless definitions of how you can classify different types of governments and leaders. So sometimes things just defy neat categorization. At least that's been my sad experience.
I feel like if we're using totalitarianism in a colloquial sense and not really delving into the philosophy and trying to come up with, a standard sort of proto scientific definition, the Soviet Union is really the first thing that comes to my mind if we're taking into account both capabilities and intentions.
Yeah, I mean they had um, a remarkable commitment to it and set up all of these, down to shop level surveillance mechanisms that were just completely unlike. They also had an ideology of party control over, everything, which I do think is a bit different from, you know, absolute right of kings to rule or so yeah, I think maybe the search for proto totalitarianism is a silly one, and that the right the right answer is to understand everything that came before the 20th century as um, merely authoritarian.
Can I pull on a thread that is very tangential to what you just mentioned, but sort of ties into something I wanted to ask Emily yesterday, but we didn't have time?
Sure.
So you said control over everything, and the first thing that came to my mind were not just sort of the levers of political action, but also cultural products as well. And I'm a little curious, like the Soviet Union, despite being totalitarian for pretty much the entirety of its existence, still had some really good cultural output. And one of the things I wanted to ask Emily yesterday is like, why is that? If you compare it to modern China or Nazi Germany, you still have some really great literature, both poetry and prose, and some really great films and some really great conductors in a way that you really don't with Nazi Germany. You don't with Ceausescu's Romania. You don't with Mao's China. And I don't think we have a Russia expert on with us right now, but I've always been curious as to why that is.
So I have some information about that.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, the Soviet culture declined markedly over the course of the Soviet
Mm-hmm.
Union. And the, it is true that in the uh, early years of the Soviet Union, there was um, a great deal of culture.
Mm-hmm.
And it is also true that Stalin made war on that culture in a very aggressive fashion. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the the cultural flourishing in Kiev is completely wiped out in the
Mm-hmm.
30s. Um, the cultural genocide of the sort of leading Ukrainian painters, writers, poets is wiped out. It's like, Holocaust level cultural destruction. Um, and something similar actually goes on among Russian cultural figures, at least of a even vaguely modernist variety. The two exceptions are Prokofiev and Shostakovich
Shostakovich, yeah.
in the musical area. Both of them are quite oppressed on an
Mm-hmm.
individual level, but they're significant enough international figures that Stalin does not find it convenient to murder them.
Mm-hmm.
And they do both play ball in terms of
Yeah.
producing, um, you know, really bad marches that are like useful to the state. And so there's an interesting combination that goes on with them of tolerance and oppression. um, uh, Russian cultural output was very like these were very celebrated figures. The Russian
Mm-hmm.
musical tradition, as you know, goes back uh, really to the beginning of the 19th century, or the sort of early middle part of the 19th century, and is very rich, and it's very valued culturally um, in as an example, in the Russian mind, Russia has to be competitive with Germany, right? And the cultural ability to compete with Germany is partly a musical thing, right? Bach is, there's no Russian Bach, but starting in the 19th century, Russia starts producing, composers that are actually decidedly not as great as German composers, but the Russian cultural imagination, they are competitive. And so the idea of killing off your musical talent is a little bit less palatable. The poets, they did kill. Um, and late Soviet history, it has dissident poets, but it doesn't have the culture is not producing anything interesting in fiction, in until
Yeah, I mean,
um
I'd push back on that with respect to the medium of film. I mean,
yes, well, they
you know,
always had
yeah,
but so did the Nazis. The Nazis had really good film.
they did. I've actually been there's a film that was made under the supervision of Goebbels that is devoid of political content, which has recently been remastered and released on Blu-ray and 4K. I've really been wrestling as to whether I should buy it because I very much want to see it, but feel like I'm making some sort of moral compromise.
Yeah, it's not like Goebbels is going to get the money or
No, I know, but you know,
I just I mean the point is like you can reduce the question about Soviet culture should not be how much they produced. They definitely did produce a lot,
yeah.
although an amazing amount of it is shit. You
Mhm.
know, you know, the official artistic production of the Soviet Union, which was quite voluminous, is mostly just garbage.
No,
Um,
but when
but
they succeeded, they really succeeded to a degree that puts a lot like, the I forget the director's name, but like there's the 10-hour adaptation of War and Peace in the
yeah,
six
and there's the
10-hour
Alexander Nevsky.
Nevsky, the entire output of Tarkovsky, which goes well into the 80s.
Yes, I'm not saying there's not some valuable production, and
Mhm.
what I'm saying is that the right metric is not how much there is in absolute terms, but how much there is relative to how much there would have been if you'd just let Russian artistic production, you know, run without Stalinism and without party control for 70 years.
Mhm.
And I think it is reasonable to say that it got worse and worse and worse and more static over time and by the way flourished starting in the late 80s
Mhm.
when you lightened up on censorship and it was they took a very rich artistic tradition and mostly but not completely ruined it.
Mhm.
I don't like did they ruin it as completely as Mao did?
No,
No.
no.
Um, but did
It's a sliding scale, I
they
guess.
worked pretty hard at it. Sorry, Carol, you've been
That's
trying to get
okay.
in.
Yeah, well, um, only to change the subject
All right.
because getting back to the chat, I did suggest that I would talk about the martial arts,
Oh,
and some of it
interesting.
actually fits into this.
All right, let's go.
Okay, so um, when when the previous ruler decided that everybody had to decide which of the four social classes they would be, it meant a dividing line between samurai and producers and quote unquote peasants that had not previously existed. So you had this level of samurai who had to choose either to go into the city and be a samurai or stay on the land and become a peasant. So it was one of those big fish, small pond, small fish, big pond kinds of decisions. And of course, a lot of people chose to live in the cities. Now, the samurai governments, that, I mean, it was run by the samurai, but there are only so many positions. And so you had an awful lot of unemployed, aimlessly wandering around samurai. And it was,
There was even a name for that. It'll come to me, or at least the translation of it will come to me.
this is different from samurai who don't have a master.
Right, right. No, this is samurai who don't have positions and who are kind of roving as a result. And there's a sort of weird line between them and bandits. A lot of them are sort of functionally robbing people.
The samurai did that almost from the very beginning. I mean, but getting on back to martial arts, sorry. It's hard for me to stay focused sometimes. So what they wanted to do was they found ways to kind of help keep up morale. They wanted to, create this ideology of, the samurai is superior, and martial arts were a big part of that. And before the Tokugawa period, when samurai weren't really fighting because there wasn't much fighting to be done, before that, when you had martial arts, they were very short courses, right? Because it was like 6 months to figure out how to kill your enemy with a sword, right? Or whatever you were using. But after that, they became much more elaborate and they became much bigger. You had martial arts focusing on using muskets. You had them focusing on swimming, as well as the more well-known ones like the karate or the kendo, the swords and stuff like that. Okay, they became very elaborate. And another thing that happened was, before that, you would do your course, you paid the teacher when you got finished. Okay, and you had a steady flow of customers because, of course, lots of people killing people and lots of people getting killed. In the Tokugawa period, that didn't happen. So what happened was the masters, in order to maintain a living, started kind of awarding accomplishment certificates when they would master a certain level of martial arts. And this was a way to generate income, basically. And that's how you end up with different colored belts. Okay, that was really got started as. Now, I don't want to diss the martial arts as they're practiced now, right? There's so many benefits to that. There's a lot of discipline. There's a lot of good about it. But in the Tokugawa period, it's also true that some of the differences between the different schools of teaching for swords, for example, were based on, there were secret teachings along the lines of, when you put your step forward, you lift your toe. And that's a secret teaching, right? Some of them had different hand gestures that you make before you pull the sword, which functionally is a terrible idea, because not only does it delay you getting your sword out, but it also telegraphs what school you've been taught in.
Interesting.
Okay, so some of the martial arts had legs, and they have changed since then. They've developed since then. But at the time, some of them were basically, if you'll excuse the expression, boondoggles.
Well, that's still true, actually. As somebody who's spent a lot of time studying martial arts, there's a fair bit of bullshit in martial arts culture. And sometimes it's ideological and political bullshit. Sometimes it's, um, it's technique based. Sometimes it's philosophical new agey shit. But there's a lot of garbage in it. And one reason to spend time cross training between different styles is that you actually learn what is hype within a style and what is valuable. Um, and so I spent a lot of time cross training between Aikido, which is a it's kind of a 20th century uh, refinement of a lot of uh, traditional Budo techniques, and uh, Taekwondo, which is
Korean.
it's a Korean style of basically hard striking karate. And they couldn't be more different in terms of how you're actually using your arms and legs and torso, but they shine a real light on what's nonsense in the other. Um, and in a way that, you can really um, you can then synthesize a little bit. But one of the descendant of the point that you're making that lives to this day is this belief in almost every martial arts style that it is the way, and they all have you know almost all of them involve the word do at the end of the word. Aikido, kendo, right?
And do
And
means the
that
way.
and do literally means the way, right? Taekwondo means the way of punches and kicks. And there's um, they've definitely retained exactly what you're describing, which is this idea of you progress through the secret wisdom of the style, right?
Right, right,
And
exactly.
and some of them um are more you know Scientology like about it than others, in that you know but you definitely have a residue of that teaching style, that there's you're progressing through a laddered chain of knowledge, and by the way, knowledge outside the system doesn't count. um
Fun factoid, karate,
Indeed.
they now say it's open hand, right? Originally, kata meant Chinese. Karate was Chinese hand. But in the early 20th century, when Japan decided that China was backward and they ought to learn from Japan, and Japan nationalism became much stronger, they decided it did not mean Chinese hand, it meant empty hand. Because kata as Chinese and kata as open or sky, that character, they're different characters, but it's the same reading.
Interesting, because you know the national qualities of some of these arts. Taekwondo is a 20th century creation in order to make Korea have a national martial art that was not Japanese, right? And it's a kind of anti-colonial, you know, and the South Korean government has spent an enormous amount of time and money over the years promoting Taekwondo overseas, successfully. There are now many, many more Taekwondo studios than karate studios. It's much more popular worldwide, and this is a result really of a propaganda campaign that the Koreans, they wanted the number one martial art to be theirs, not Japanese. And they wanted, when people think of somebody doing a flying kick, to be them to think of a Korean word, not Bruce
Right.
Lee or and these are, like, people have a sense of these martial arts as very old. They're really not. I mean, the proto martial arts are obviously old, but when people think of these things in terms of systems, right? I mean, you know, they're pretty recent, that people systematized them and made them, a formal, and again, it's a descendant of
And the
exactly the
Tokugawa
thing that
period is
you're
part of that process, but they're far from the end of it.
right. It doesn't stop at the end of the Tokugawa period. And it, by the way, it doesn't stop in the islands of Japan. So, Japanese people in Brazil create their own style of jujitsu, which is now the dominant style of, mixed martial arts. And, query whether it's mostly jujitsu or mostly this Brazilian, thing that developed off of it. And so it's actually an interesting, and we were talking yesterday with Emily about the role that Sistema, which is this intentionally very brutal Russian martial arts system. It's literally called Sistema, the system, which is kind of a Russian Krav Maga, um, that it plays in Putin ideology and also white supremacist ideology. These are the wrapping up of martial arts in um, uh, in larger ideological and nationalist constructions, may have begun in Tokugawa Japan but it really metastasized, and it's, very much gone global.
And another related thing is the whole idea of the way of the samurai. The Book of Five Rings, all of that changed dramatically between when the samurai were actually doing what they were supposed to do, as in fighting, and how it was framed when they could not fight. And part of that, again, is functional because if these are active fighters and they're active in the countryside, you want one set of behaviors, but if they're not, then you need something to keep them quiet,
Yeah,
but
so
also
if you
give them a sense of superiority.
so the right, so the famous, I believe it's 18th century, um, uh, text, "The way of the samurai is death."
Right.
Choose death on the,
Not
if
that it
this
get you very
happens, if
far in a
this.
war.
Right. You don't need to tell somebody who's actually fighting that they might die, that they should think about death every day, that they should contemplate, you know, right. The battlefield does that for you. You have
Exactly.
to tell.
Exactly.
I'm trying to remember that. Let me pull the text of the passage. Um, and um, uh, you don't have to create a death cult um of yeah, it's from the Hagakure, and um I have found that the way of the samurai is death. This means that when you are compelled to choose between life and death, you must quickly choose death. There is nothing more to it than that. You just make up your mind and you go forward. The idea that to die without accomplishing your purpose is undignified and meaningless, just dying like a dog, is the pretentious Bushido of the city slickers of Kyoto and Osaka. In the situation between where you have to choose between life and death, there is no way to make sure that your purpose will be accomplished. All of us prefer life over death, and you can find more reasons for choosing what you like over what you dislike. If you fail and you survive, you are a coward.
Which
Yeah,
led to the ideology of the uh, number of people who died in number of soldiers who died
sure.
in World War II,
It
because I mean, a lot of those suicides were coerced, right?
and
But
we're completely militarily useless, right? This
yes,
isn't
stupid
actually a
militarily.
function. This is a function of I mean, ironically criticizes the Bushido of city slickers, but this is the Budo of city slickers, right? And you can create a kind of ultra-nationalist ideology out of it, but it's not a great way to fight a war, and it's not an ideology that people who are actually fighting are going to develop. It's people who are romanticizing fighting while sitting around, polishing their swords.
And what's really funny, real quick, is about the city slickers is they had to move to the cities. You couldn't be a samurai and not be a city slicker.
Right, right.
Bye-bye.
Folks, we're going to leave it there. We have a guest tomorrow. It may be a guest who brings a competing cactus. I'm excited about it. You should be excited about it. Join us. Mike Feinberg, you're a great American. Great to see you.
Likewise.
We'll be back tomorrow.